Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our Wednesday webinars. Today is the last in this series, Teaching Trinity Rock and Pop. And the instrument that we are featuring today is the bass. We have a very talented and experienced panel of presenters it's our whole guitar team from our academic support team. So you're in for some great information and knowledge. Let me just quickly introduce them. We have Mark Hayden from Ahmedabad, a great guitarist, very talented. I'm sure you've interacted with him fairly often. We have Siddharth from Mumbai. Siddharth has been with us for the longest time and a very valuable member to our team. We have Abhishek Lal from Delhi. Abhishek is a teacher and a classical and a rock musician. Ritvik Bhattacharya, who quite a few of you would be familiar with. He's from Bangalore. And again, he belongs to a band called Pineapple Express and does his teaching and consulting with us very competently. Anson Matthews from Kochi. Anson is the all-rounder, as is Albert, who is from Ludhiana. Both of them play multiple instruments as well as sing and do a whole lot of other things. So without much ado, I'm going to hand over now to Ritvik, who will take this presentation and webinar forward.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome again. We've got a very exciting one for you today because this is an instrument that's often overlooked, very underrated, but it makes a huge impact in the sound of a rock or a pop band. It's the electric bass guitar. Now, the bass guitar has often been looked at as a guitar with fewer strings, just tuned down an octave. But funnily enough, the bass itself is older than the guitar. It started out as this instrument that looked like the violin had a massive growth spurt, and it's known as the double bass or the upright bass today. Funnily enough, the guitar as we know it today originates partly from this instrument, as the need of the time seemed to be an instrument that played in tune with the bass, but an octave above it. It was also given two more strings, and that's kind of roughly how the modern guitar, was born. Now, with the advent of electrical amplification of sound in the 1930s, musician and inventor Paul Tutmark created the first known electric bass, but it didn't really sell very well, didn't get a lot of popularity. It was only in 1951 when Leo Fender made the now hallowed precision bass that the instrument started gaining popularity, and the rest, as they say, is history. The Fender Jazz Bass came out a couple of years later, sometime around 1960, and it had a more advanced pickup layout. It had a pickup near the neck and another one closer to the bridge. What happened as a result of this was you could switch between these pickups and give yourself a much wider tonal palette. And ever since then, innovative design upon innovative design have led to today, where the electric bass guitar has evolved to become more ergonomic, more comfortable to play, and with more control over the sound that you get from it, all the way from active electronics to multiple strings to extended range and all sorts of technological changes. Now, all this has been done to enable the performer, the player, to perform at their absolute best 100% of the time. And speaking of performance, that is what our rock and pop syllabus focuses primarily on. Performing music on stage is a vital part of a musician's career. It requires skill, confidence, and a showman's spirit to pull off. Studio engineers and producers as well aim to capture the energetic and flawless performances of musicians to release on various media. Now, this has been kept in mind by the designers of our syllabus and has been structured in a way that the candidate develops a solid foundation and then builds on it as they advance through the grades. This includes learning a wide array of styles and techniques and practicing to perform them with intention, confidence, and aplomb. The songs in our repertoire books have also been chosen keeping in mind the pioneers of the instrument, so the candidates can learn through their example and develop a strong playing ability. Some of the artists that have been featured in our syllabus include Michael Jackson, Red Hot Chili Peppers, Alien Ant Farm, the Beatles, Alabama Shakes, Daft Punk, and a whole bunch of others. Now, let's talk briefly about the music we're going to play. We call it contemporary music. Now, composers have always exploited the latest and greatest in music technology, and the styles of writing have changed through the centuries. We have now moved on from Baroque and Romantic compositions to rock, pop, funk, blues, soul, metal, a whole other bunch of genres that people listen to and play. Now, with the advent of so many new genres, also grew the demand for musicians who were well rounded and could play almost everything convincingly. They would usually specialize in one form of music, but would be able to play most anything they were required to. And that is what a contemporary musician is. Historically, a contemporary musician underwent little to no formal training and had to be self taught in the styles and techniques that modern music demanded. However, Trinity had realized the need to make contemporary music education more accessible to people from the very basics, and that is when the rock and pop syllabus was conceived, after which it was brought to the world in 2012. The purpose of this syllabus is to learn music that is fun, cool, and enriching, while receiving international certification at the same time, which gives it some value and gravitas. Now that we've taken a look at the history of our chosen instrument and the kinds of music we need to make with it, it's time to talk about the role of a bass player today. Players can be session musicians, they can be recording musicians or perform, as a hired gun, as a freelancer once in a while with a band or as part of a production. Or they can be a full-time member of a band and go on tour with them and primarily perform live. Usually, given the situation in this day and age, they all do both. It's great to dabble in a bit of everything, and musicians are required to have a DIY approach to everything anyway. So the bass plays a very pivotal role in the sound of a band, being the bridge between the rhythmic elements of drums and percussion and the harmonic and melodic elements of guitars, keys, and vocals. We can look at the bass as an instrument that adds harmony to grooves or adds rhythm to melodic and harmonic elements. It's very much an instrument that glues the sound of an ensemble together and makes the music sound cohesive and powerful. Of course, that's not where the roles and duties of a bassist stops. The bass can also be a lead instrument, lending its unique and powerful sound to enrich either sections of songs, or it can even be in the forefront of entire, discographies, like what Les Claypool has done with Primus. Now, while we're talking about the cutting edge in music technology and performing modern forms of music, we must also remember some of the pioneers who have pushed and shaped the sounds and roles of the bass to where they are today. Players like James Jamerson, Jaco Pastorius, Paul McCartney, Larry Graham, Stanley Clarke, Anthony Jackson, Marcus Miller, Jack Bruce, Charles Mingus, the names go on and on and on. There are so many legends from all over the world who have completely changed the way we look at and listen to bass playing. And of course, we must not forget that there's a whole bunch of extremely talented bass players in India as well, including legends like Carl Peters, Keith Peters, Raghuram, Rushad Mistry, Mishko Emba, who's originally from France but settled in Pondicherry, and our very own Mohini De. Next up, I'd like to hand over to Mark, who's going to talk a little bit about styles and techniques and a little bit of the technology involved in the bass play.
Thank you, Ritvik, for that lovely insight into the bass guitar. Okay, in all these styles, whether funk, jazz, rock, pop, whatever you name it, there's a common technique that should flow through all of them, and that is to play to the song. It's very important that the bass guitar player should exercise restraint and make sure that he's working with the chord roots of the song. That's very important. A bass guitar player should also have command over a walking bass line. Another very important thing for him to do is to lock into the drummer using octaves, where the low octave corresponds to the kick and the high octave corresponds to the snare. He could also use octaves and octaves fifths with the same technique, using the low octave with the kick and, of course, the fifth with the snare. The tone is extremely important because where you pick creates a unique sound. Jakob Pastorius used to pluck near the bridge using the tips of his fingers to get a machine gun type 16th note feel, while Geezer Butler used to pluck near the base of the fretboard, making the strings slap. So the tone is a very critical part of how you sound in a band. Playing the right register is also crucial, as playing it too low would be too heavy for the mood of the song, while too high may interfere with the vocal or the guitar part. So now in funk, the bass sits very, very prominently in the mix, and bassists can have a blast using slapping, popping, double notes, slides, syncopated thumb movements. An example of this is the Red Hot Chili Peppers' minor third movements in Give It Away. In jazz, the bass player's function is to outline the harmony, and his rhythm playing must be seen as different ways of expressing musical time. For example, in slow ballads, walking bass lines with quarter notes, he can add a couple of eighth notes for syncopation and rhythmic interest. Ditto for the blues and rock, where in both these genres, the bass provides both the rhythmic and the harmonic foundation. And especially in rock, where the bass acts like the concrete of the musical foundation. Which also then brings me to our next topic, which is bass amplification. And with the invention of the precision bass in 1950 by Leo Fender, there arose a need for an amplifier that could handle this low frequency output. Leo Fender came out with the Fender Bassman, which was a 50-watt tube amplifier with a single 15-inch speaker. This design has evolved over time into a speaker cabinet with 4 10-inch speakers. And this particular circuitry became a gold standard in bass guitar amplification. It was also used by guitar players and also became the foundation of the Marshall amplifier when Jim Marshall took the Fender Bassman circuit to England and started building his now famous iconic Marshall amplifiers, which are now part of rock and roll history. But as PA systems became more and more powerful, bass guitar players started carrying portable bass amps and solid state amps and started sending their signals directly to the PA for a more cleaner and a more comfortable and controllable sound. There were also bass guitar players who used to carry heavy cabinets and amp heads because they loved the sound of tubes and the warm sound of the distortion that the amp generated. But today's hybrid amps give the best of both worlds, combining a warm overdriven tube sound with the convenience and size and portability of a solid state amp. And of course, the next question arises that when you choose a bass amp, what are the features that you would like to look for? And it's extremely important to have, of course, tone control. That's a no-brainer. You should have control over the bass, mid and treble to dial in a good sound. Some of these amps have a bright switch. Resonance control is important because it fine-tunes the amplifier output to the speakers, creating a more tighter and a more focused sound. It's also important to have multiple channels because many amps have a clean and an overdriven channel, and you can switch them between with a foot switch to create drastically different tones between songs or during the same song. While guitar players use different channels for creating different levels of distortion and clean tones, a bass guitar player may also use multiple channels to buy or tri-amp his speakers to different size speakers like a 10-inch or a 12-inch or a 15-inch speakers. Of course, gain control again is very important because it's important for the bass guitar player to have a control of the warmth and the overdrive that he would like to have with his instrument. Direct output again is a very important feature to be seen on a bass amp because direct connection to the PA with XLR connectors with a pre or a post level EQ switch can help in tone shaping. It's also important to have switchable impedance because if you're only carrying a bass amp to a show, it's important to switch between 4, 8 or 16 ohm cabinets, which depending on what kind of speakers are available at the venue. Multiple speaker jacks is also a good reason to have. It's a good feature to have because you're not sure whether the speakers on stage are 1/4-inch TRS or XLR or Nutrix speak-on connectors. So having these multiple outputs is very, very handy on a bass guitar amp. And yes, if you use passive or active pickups, having different inputs for passive and active inputs is a great feature to have. Some bass players carry an acoustic double bass to mic the instruments out. So having an XLR balanced input to put in a microphone is a great feature. Needless to say, a foot switch jack for controlling effects and changing channels. having an effects loop for adding time-based effects between the pre and the power amp is also a great feature to have. Let's not forget the mute switch when you're having your coffee break, tuning guitars or changing guitars. And of course, the switchable power supply, particularly if you're traveling abroad, so you do not have to carry different voltage stabilizers to adjust to the local power requirements. A UV meter or a clipping meter to detect clipping is again another important feature on a professional bass amp. So these are some of the features you could look for in picking up a bass amp for your show. Yes, with that comes your effects pedals. Bass guitar players, as you can see, are now beginning to compete with guitar players in terms of the number of pedals they use for a show. But some of the essential bread and butter pedals that are extremely important for shaping a good bass guitar sound would be compression, that is used for evening out the sound of the bass and is very beneficial for popping, slapping, and walking bass lines. The octave pedal, again, is a great pedal that helps emphasize the lower end. The bass overdrive, which is commonly seen in a lot of rock bass guitar players, is great for adding harmonics, sustain, and color, and filling up the sound in a trio. In funk, bass filters help nail a very particular tone and is useful in hip-hop, electronic music, which is a great unit to have on your board. Not to forget the two basic ones, which is the EQ, helping to nail a specific tone, and of course, the limiter, which will control the dynamic, which controls the dynamic range. All of this is not only available as standalone pedals, as you can see on the pedal boards over there, but you can buy them in a very convenient multi-effects processor, which has all of them and more, like delay and reverb and chorus, which I've not mentioned, phaser and the other standard guitar effects. But these effects in a bass multi-effects processor are fine-tuned for the lower end frequencies of the bass. So when you're looking for a multi-effects processor, you must make sure that you're buying a processor that is specifically required for the bass. And with that, I'd like to hand over to my colleague Siddharth, who will take you through the bass syllabus. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you for that. So the Trinity Rock and Pop bass syllabus has a lot to offer. I would definitely like to get into the details and give you all a brief idea about that. But before we do so, let's take a quick look at the video. If you all observe the video very closely, what was quite obvious is that it spoke about real songs, real skills, and real progress. So our syllabus has a variety of real songs that the candidate can choose, which has a huge array of styles and stylistic approach, which eventually leads to developing real skills such as improvisation, playback, and other professional skills that musicians need in the modern day's time, which cumulatively leads to real progress, which helps the candidate to achieve their goals with a recognized qualification. Now looking at the examination. So the Rock and Pop examination is for 100 marks in total. The candidate has to choose 3 pieces to perform, out of which one is a technical focus piece. The 2 songs are for 25 marks each, and the technical focus is for 30 marks. That collectively makes it 80 marks. The remaining 20 marks are handed over to session skills. So the candidates even have an option over there. They can either choose playback or session skills. So now let's take a quick look at what happens during an examination. The candidate has to make sure that everything is in order, everything is in place, they're carrying, and they are fully prepared for the examination. The candidates are definitely responsible for making a thorough check and making sure that all the instruments are in tune. It's always best that if you carry a tuner along with you, and in case if a candidate feels that different songs require different stylistic approach and instruments, so they can carry multiple instruments. Candidates are also allowed to use a 5-string or a 6-string bass guitar if they like, based on their choice of pieces, and they are also free to make a choice of what kind of gear they want to use. In case if they are comfortable using their own amplifier, they are more than welcome to carry their own amplifier. But just to make sure, they can always call the examination center or the local representative to quickly check what kind of gear is available. Also, a big question a lot of new students have: do we have to carry during the examination? What are the essentials that the candidate? First and foremost, they need the original Trinity Rock and Pop book. Sure, you do not forget your Rock and Pop book. Also, make sure that your appointment form is with you and it's completed. Mention your set list in order. In case if you have any additional requirements or demands, just make sure you fill it out in the option that is, there's a blank bottom. Just make sure you fill it out over there. And definitely the instrument, because the center will not provide you with a bass guitar. So make sure you have your own bass guitar. And if the candidate decides on performing an own choice piece, they have to be ready with the backing track on a CD along with the full score. It has to be printed out and submitted to the exam. Also make sure you mention that on the appointment slip. And in case if the candidates are looking for additional options, what is best for them, there is they have to make sure that they have working guitar lead cables, their effect board, pedal boards. In case if they think they have to carry their own amplifier, they can do that. Necessary set of spare strings, but of course a guitar tuner. Now let's take a look at the stylistic approach at the foundation level. So to take you through that, I would like to hand this over to my colleague Albert.
Thank you, Siddharth, and good afternoon, everyone. Whatever your musical styles and tastes be, Trinity College London offers a huge range of styles and technical skills that a professional musician needs today. So guys, let's talk and understand the 3 levels of assessment representing the key stages of musical development for a candidate. Number 1 is foundation level, starting from grade initial up to grade 3. Number 2 is intermediate level from grade 4 to 5. And finally, the advanced level from grade 6 up to grade 8. So the slide in front of us shows the whole range and variety of styles, from rock to pop, soul to swung, synth pop to reggae, and so on. Let's dive in and look into few important styles featured in the foundation level syllabus. And the first one in the list is rock. The most popular word in music is rock. Rock music is a genre which originated as rock and roll in 1950s in USA. It is influenced by a number of other genres such as blues, jazz, and classical music. Now, the bass player in a rock band acts a sort of link between the drummer and the rest of the band. As Mark sir also mentioned that, they lock into the beat of the bass drum and help link the main beat, the main pulse of the music, from somewhat dry sound of the drums to the warmer sound of the melody and harmony. The bass acts like a concrete foundation in rock music style that, while you might not always notice it, you would notice if it was missing. The song featured in grade initial level is All Along the Watchtower by the very popular American singer-songwriter Bob Dylan. Dylan had written this song while recuperating for 18 months at his home in Woodstock after a tragic motorcycle accident. The song was recorded a year after with Charlie McCoy on the bass guitars. The song has a 3-chord progression. You'll notice the bass notes moving back and forth in A minor, G, and F. Let's hear a short clip from the song.
There must be some way out of here, said the joker to the thief. There's too much confusion, I can't get no relief. Businessmen, they drink my wine, plowmen dig my earth.
Yeah. So while Bob Dylan did the original version of this song, it wasn't well known until Jimi Hendrix released a transformative cover of the same song. Moving on to the next style, we have folk waltz. It's a fusion of two very distinctive music styles, which have a long history and tradition behind them. Folk music, as we all know, is type of traditional and generally rural music that originally was passed down through families and people. Music formed by custom or culture of a particular region. Folk music is said to be music of the people. It's expected that anyone can play and sing it, not just professional musicians. Waltz, on the other hand, is a ballroom and folk dance, which is usually in triple meter and is often supported by a bass accompanied style, which sounds like pa 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 pa. Now, this one consists of a bass note in beat 1, followed by a chord that is played on beats 2 and 3. So the bass guitar typically provides the beat for the music and outline the chord progression of the song. Let's hear the song in grade 1 syllabus.
Tire, oh mist rolling in from the sea. My desire is always to be here. Oh, tire. Sweep through the heather like deer in the glen.
Yeah, so written by the iconic star Paul McCartney, Mull of Kintyre is by the British-American band Wings. This Scottish folk love song is about the place where Paul lived, known as Mull of Kintyre, about how he enjoyed being there and wanting to so much go back there. This typical folk waltz song featured bagpipes, which were played by the local pipe band of that area. Moving ahead, the next style in the list is rock ballad, as you can see. A ballad, as we all know, is a song that tells a story, and it can be dramatic, funny, or romantic. Usually, a rock ballad is a rock composition which can often be lengthy but has emotional subject matter at its core. They are often love songs, but can also refer to any song which revolves around an emotional topic, which could be about love, death, fear, or even depression. So basically, guys, incorporating rock music elements makes a love song rock ballad. Now, as a bass player, one needs to be completely in sync with the band, and especially the drummer. The focus should be toned down in the verses and then blasting to full volume in the choruses, complementing those overdrive guitars. The bridge parts are optional. You can play full bass volume or you can tone it down. Whereas the ending is usually focused on a sustained chord from the bass with no drums, but just a cymbal trail. Few evergreen rock ballads of all time are Madness by Muse, I Don't Want to Miss a Thing by Aerosmith, Romeo and Juliet by Dire Straits. One such timeless song is included in our grade 2 syllabus, which is You've Got a Friend by famous American singer-songwriter Carole King, and features the incomparable Leland Bruce Keller on the bass. The song won quite a few Grammy Awards as well. Now guys, to be honest, we are also often caught up in playing fast and fancy stuff. So the question is, are we playing effectively? Are we playing dynamically? If you listen carefully, the bass part in this song, you'll understand how Leland Scaler has managed to play just the right part and right number of notes. Let's listen to the song.
When you're down and troubled and you need some love and care, and nothing is going right, close your eyes and think of me, and soon
Yeah, it's a beautiful song about being there for others and being a friend to someone in need. The next in the list of the styles is reggae. Originated in Jamaica in the late 1960s, evolving out of the earlier genres, ska and rocksteady, there were many other musical genres as well which influenced it, including rhythm and blues, jazz, and mento. Reggae has a significantly slower tempo and has more stress on beats 2 and 4 and less on 1 and 3. The bass guitar often plays the dominant role in reggae style. The bass sound in reggae is thick and heavy and equalized, so the upper frequencies are removed and the lower frequencies are emphasized, giving it a characteristically fat sound. The bassist often plays a riff that repeats the same rhythm through a given section of the song, but may be altered to fit to the changing harmony. It underpins the pulse with a walking line, accompanied with an offbeat comping pattern from a guitarist or a pianist. Let's listen to the song from reggae style featured in grade 3.
Giant steps are what you take, walking on the moon. I hope my legs don't break, walking on the moon. We could walk forever, walking on the moon.
Yeah, Walking on the Moon and Grooving on the Moon. It's a song by English reggae rock band The Police, released as the second single from their second studio album, Regate de Blanc. The song was written by the band's lead vocalist and bassist, famous Sting. Acknowledging the strong reggae roots of this song, Sting has also performed it at a 2013 Grammy Awards in a tribute to reggae legend Bob Marley. So dear teachers and friends, these are the few important styles of music falling in the foundation level of bass guitar syllabus. Now we move on to the technical focus songs, which are especially designed to develop the technical skills. And as mentioned by Siddharth, this performance is marked out of 30 marks. So now I'll hand over the presentation to my friend and colleague, Anson.
Thank you, Albert. That was some great information regarding the foundation level styles. Bass has many forms: electric, upright, or synthesized. Whatever its shape, it's a crucial element to popular music these days. Most songs don't need a great bass line, but the ones that have them are propelled into greatness. Trinity's rock and pop bass foundation level gives you songs that are designed to help beginner level students develop specific and relevant techniques in their bass performance. These are called as technical focus songs, from rhythmic accuracy to articulation and dynamics. These songs will help you cover two specific technical elements which will not only help you in exams, but also will enable you to become an all-rounded musician. Now, let's look into some of the songs. In grade 1 of the foundation level, we have Michael Jackson's Billie Jean. The techniques focused in this iconic song are articulation and coordination. Articulation is an important aspect of the song. Make clear contrast between the separate and bulky quavers at the start and the smooth melodic material at the pre-chorus. Make sure you pop out the repetitive bass line to give that extra oomph to the song. Coordination is also a challenge at the opening and whenever the opening material comes back. So aim for a neat finger technique to help the hands align. Let's listen to this clip.
She was more like a beauty queen from a movie scene. I said, don't mind, but what do you mean? I am the one who will dance on the floor in a round. She said, I am the one who will dance on the floor in a round. People always told me, be careful what you do. Don't go around breaking young girls' hearts.
Yes, there you go. What an iconic bass line played by Louis Johnson, a well-reputed bass player of that time. His signature sound came from a Music Man Stingray bass guitar, which Leo Fender made for him. The articulated and perky quaver bass lines in the song are a contribution by Johnson that made it funky and stand out from the classical arrangements of the song. And I'm sure everybody has heard this bass line. Yes, now moving on into grade 2, we have something to talk about. Techniques being focused in this song are slides and rests. To slide means to glide across or between multiple pitches. Slides can connect a pair of notes. They can lead into a single note or follow one. Slides are a big feature of this song, so emphasize them where they occur. Make sure you practice your slides with great accuracy and fluency. Rests are also used in some passages to create contrast with the legato sections. Observe the rests carefully to bring out these contrasts. Let's take a listen to this track.
Of the things I've learned about a boy who's bleeding, celebrate to elevate. The joy is not the same without the pain.
Yes, there you go. Hope you heard the slides towards the end of the clip. The slides being highlighted are the most common type of slides that connects two distinct notes. In this clip, you heard the starting note and the ending note with a slide up through the pitches in between, drawing attention to these notes. See that you practice your slides as well as rests, which brings out clear contrast in the legato sections. In grade 3, we have Misery Business. Techniques being showcased in this grade are palm muting while using a pick and articulation. The beginning of the song requires palm muting while using a pick at a soft dynamic level. This will require a careful control of the picking hand, and you'll also need to bring out the accents in the beginning. Articulation requires precision throughout, but take particular care at the section which requires staccato and accented quavers. Let's look into this technique. Yes, hope you heard the palm muting technique as well as the staccato quavers highlighted in the clip. Now, to expand a bit on the technique used here. The palm mute is a playing technique for guitar and bass guitar, executed by placing the side of the picking hand below the little finger across the strings to be plucked, very close to the bridge, and then plucking the strings while damping in effect. This produces a muted sound. Palm muting with a pick can be achieved by resting the bottom of your right hand or palm on the bridge and just alternate pick. Typically, you don't have to move too much or the muting technique won't be realized correctly. Also, to achieve a good articulation, you can practice scales ascending on legato and scale descending on staccato. Make sure you practice these techniques slow first and then up to speed once you have gained confidence. Yes, now moving on to the intermediate level styles and techniques, I hand the presentation over to Abhishek.
Thank you, Anson. So now we move on to the intermediate level of Trinity Rock and Pop Bass. Now, Trinity Rock and Pop Bass offers a study in a wide variety of musical styles that help in the development of the candidate to become a well-rounded musician. There are several styles that you're going to study, which include funk, heavy rock, 16-note shuffle, R&B, 60s pop, Motown, etc. Now let's look at funk, which is one of the styles of intermediate level. So funk is a music genre that originated in the African American communities in the mid-1960s. Influences of funk include a mixture of soul, jazz, and R&B. Funk de-emphasizes the melody and chord progression and focuses on a strong rhythmic groove of the bass line and played by the bassist and the drummer. This is a pretty complex groove with the instruments interlocking with each other. Now, the bass plays a very important role in funk music because of its locked in groove, continuous playing, and using several techniques like slap and pop, which has become a distinctive element of funk music. Slapping and popping uses a mixture of thumb slap low notes. It is also called as thumb, in which we slap the low notes with our thumb, and finger popped, or also called as plugged. So basically we are picking the fingers, picking the higher strings with our fingers, also called as plugged or popped. So hence the term slap and pop, allowing the bass to have a drum-like rhythmic role. So some of the very well-known bassists in this particular style are Bernard Edwards of Chic, Mark Adams. In Trinity in Trinity Rock and Pop Grade 4, we feature a song "I Wish" by Stevie Wonder, who is one of the pioneers of funk music. In this, you'll observe the bass line as a repetitive bass line, which is locking in perfectly with the groove. So let's have a listen.
Looking back on when I was a little nappy-headed boy, and my only worry was for Christmas what would be my toy. Even though we sometimes wouldn't get a thing.
So that was "I Wish" by Stevie Wonder. Moving on, we move on to the genre heavy rock. As it was described earlier by Albert, rock is a music genre or style that is very popular and a very vast or broad genre of rock and roll. Rock is a song-based music with 4/4 time signature. The bass guitar provides the low-end sound, which is very crucial to making the music heavy. And the bass plays even a more important role in heavy rock and metal music than any other genre. Some of the very well-known bassists in this category include Billy Sheehan and Cliff Burton. In Trinity Rock and Pop Grade 5, there's a song featured called "Reach Out, I'll Be There" by Four Tops. In this, when we listen to the bass line, it provides the heaviness and the depth that is often heard in hard rock and heavy music. So let's have a listen to it.
Now if you feel that you can't go on because all of your hope is gone and your life is filled with much confusion until happiness is just an illusion.
So that was "Reach Out, I'll Be There." Now we move on to the techniques at the intermediate level. Now, at the intermediate level, the candidate is required to demonstrate a higher level of technical and musical ability. Some of the techniques that are included at the intermediate level are repeated semiquavers, syncopation, semiquaver pushes, octave patterns, high melodic patterns, dynamic contrast, etc. Let's listen to some of the examples from the intermediate level. Let's listen to Sledgehammer. So, which is one of the songs in Grade 4. It features primarily two techniques, that is semiquaver pushes and slides. So let's have a listen to the song.
You sledgehammer, why don't you call my name?
So as we just heard in the track, the bass part of this song features semiquaver pushes in the 4 bars before the verse. Now these semiquaver pushes create short bursts of faster passages, which create a movement where the melody moves forward. And in the later part of this track, we heard slides. Now slides create more fluid sounding and wider bass lines. Slides are often achieved by pressing the notes, and meanwhile not releasing the pressure. You slide the finger to the target note. You can slide up or down. So these are the two techniques that are covered in Sledgehammer. Now moving on to grade 5, we have the song Sweet Child of Mine, which is one of the most famous songs by the band Guns N' Roses. It features two techniques, that is high melodic playing and dynamic contrast. Let's listen to the first part, and which showcases high melodic playing. Let's have a listen to it. So as we just heard, the bass line sounded like a parallel melody in itself along with the main guitar melody. Usually, high melodic playing is used during bass solos and sometimes in intros and endings of the song. Now let's listen to the second part of this song, which features dynamic contrast. Let's listen to it.
Where do we go? Where do we go now? Where do we go?
So as we just heard in the song, there was a crescendo used. Now a crescendo is usually played by gradually increasing the pressure applied with the right hand on the strings. If you're playing with your fingers, you can increase the amount of pressure that you're applying with your right hand fingers, or if you're playing with the pick, you can increase the amount of pressure you're applying with the pick to increase the volume. In some cases, players also use volume pedals to make a crescendo, to make it sound like a crescendo. And in the later part of this, we heard mezzo piano. Now, mezzo piano is, you can achieve it by reducing the pick attack. If you're playing with forte, if you're playing at forte, which is louder, and you have a strong pick attack or a strong finger attack, you can reduce down your pick attack. So these are some of the examples of the techniques and styles covered at the intermediate level. Now we are going to move on to the advanced level, and I would like to hand it over to Siddharth.
Thank you, Abhishek. Thank you for that. So I'm pretty sure all of you all have understood by now that as and when we gradually move higher in the levels, the stylistic approach also increases, whereas the technical challenge and demand also slowly increases. And it just adds a lot of benefit for the candidates for their personal and real skill development. So let's take a look at the advanced level. And I would personally like to emphasize on 3 styles that are widely accepted and play a vital role, especially in a bass player's style. So we are looking at 16th note shuffle, new wave, and world beat. Let's talk about 16th note shuffle first. So what is 16th note shuffle? Shuffle is mainly a style or a groove that any musician normally feels and associates with, mainly in styles like blues and some rock and roll. And also it has a very strong and a significant stylistic overlap with the swing and jazz feel. So to sum it up, a swing 16th note feel is also referred as a 16th note shuffle. The subdivisions can be mainly counted in between the pockets. Like we tend to always count on the downbeat every time, but 16th note shuffle is all about playing in between the pocket, playing in between the beats. So that is what this song emphasizes on how to be spot on with our style of 16th note shuffle and play in between the pockets. So let's hear Scar Tissue.
Scar tissue that I wish you saw. Sarcastic Mr. Know-It-All. Close your eyes and I'll kiss you, 'cause with the birds I share, with the birds I share is a lonely view. And with the birds I share is a lonely view. And push me up against the wall, a young Kentucky girl in a push-up bra, falling all over my myself to lick your heart and taste your health, cause with the birds I share this lonely view.
All right, so let's talk about Flea. Flea is iconic and one of the most influential bass players in this style of playing. A lot of bass players across the world swear by his playing style and even try to imitate and are inspired by his playing style. So when you heard this track specifically, you could hear how the bass was boldly playing in between the pockets, and it was not disturbing the other rhythmic elements and the melodic elements that were being performed by the drummer and the bass player. So that is what a 16 shuffle usually is. So now let's look at new wave. So what is new wave exactly? New wave is a commercial style of music that picked up somewhere in the late 70s, early 1980s, mainly with a lot of artists back in the time who had these major, like, big one-hit wonders. Like, we can associate with a lot of artists who were famous for one or two tracks and then suddenly disappeared. And they were the ones who were a part of this new wave style. So talking about new wave, it's basically a broad style of music that encompasses numerous pop-oriented style of music from the same era, and the term was derived from a completely unrelated cinema movement called as the French New Wave, which originally was a catchphrase back in the day when punk rock music emerged. So, looking at the common characteristics of the new wave, it includes humorous and quirky pop approach, lyrically or musically, and it has a very distinctive audio and a visual style of feature that emphasizes on this style of music. So, to take a look at it, let's hear "Too Shy" by Kaja Gogu. Wasn't that interesting? There were so many stylistic overlaps. Let's talk about the bass guitar first, where you could hear the bass guitar being superimposing and you could hear it loud and clear. They had a very strong style of playing, whereas the keys were laying down some larger than life ambient effect. And even if you paid close attention to the tom rolls in the background, it had some sort of a filter or an effect that added a lot more value to the song. So that is what new wave sounded like. So now talking about world beat. What is world beat? The world itself speaks a lot, where it blends in multiple styles of music along with pop music. And if you ask me, that world beat is basically some sort of a cross pollination between contemporary styles of music, which has a lot of rhythmic, harmonic, and textural contrast between modern and ethnic elements. So it does feature a lot of cultural incorporation in this style of music as well. So before we spot out all the differences and details, let's hear "You Can Call Me Al" by Paul Simon.
Walks down the street, he says, why am I soft in the middle now? Why am I soft in the middle? The rest of my life is so hard. I need a photo opportunity. I want a shot at redemption. Don't want to end up a cartoon in a cartoon graveyard. Bone digger, dogs in the moonlight. Far away, my well-lit door, Mr. Beard.
Okay, so again, as we spoke about stylistic overlapping, if you heard the bass guitar, it had some neat, extraordinary bass lines. Whereas if you heard the guitars and the drums, they had some sort of a Latin bossa nova cha-cha feel going on in that. So that's how world beat came into existence. So to speak more about the kind of techniques required to play in the intermediate, in the advanced level, we have Ritvik who will be briefing you all. So I would like to hand it over to Ritvik. Ritvik, on to you.
All right. So thank you so much again, Sid. That's what I'd like to start out with. That piece was very, very insightful, very informative. Now we're moving to the techniques of the advanced level. And of course, the list of technical demands here grows ever longer. And this list is cumulative. So the techniques that we Hello, hello.
Okay,
Yeah,
you're okay.
Okay,
I can hear
I'm
you. I can
facing
hear you.
some connection issues.
Yeah.
Sorry. So the advanced level techniques, it's got a big list of demands. The list, of course, is cumulative. So the techniques that you learn at the foundation and intermediate levels are carried forward here in a more refined and musical way. Some of the highlights we'll be taking a look at are slap bass, semiquaver passage work, stamina, feel changes, pinch harmonics, and articulation. Let's take a look at some of these examples. The first one we're going to take a look at is Something Got Me Started by the band Simply Red. This song covers slapping and semiquaver passage work. So at the beginning of this clip, you're going to hear the bass playing some very bold staccato semiquavers, which are part of the end of the chorus. And that goes into this beautifully written and executed slap section in the middle. Now, what is slapping? Slapping is a technique that's quite onomatopoeic. It's the sound of the bass strings being slapped with the thumb, and it's often paired with a technique known as popping, where you tuck the finger under the string and then pull it up to let the string bounce off the fretboard and create another very kind of percussive, aggressive sound. Yeah, that's going to be in the middle of this clip. So let's take a listen.
Love for you, yes, I'll give it all up 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 for you, yes, I would. Yes, I would. Yes, I would. Got me started.
Right? So much movement in that bass line. There's so much groove, so heavy, so funky. You can't stop yourself from moving. So as you heard, the slap and pop section features a very aggressive and powerful sound. This is the section where the bass player shines. This is the section where the bass player shows off and kind of showcases their technical efficiency. Of course, this technique is really, really difficult, and it takes a lot of time, a lot of patience, and a lot of calluses on your fingers to master. Moving on to the next one, we've got Phantom of the Opera by Iron Maiden. They are heavy metal royalty, and in this clip, we'll be focusing mainly on stamina because it's just such an extraordinary display of stamina in this song. But as far as feel changes go, there is a change from a triplet feel to a straight feel when the verses begin. Let's take a listen to the intro of this song. Right? So that's so typical of British heavy metal. Everything's just uh, full on. Everything's in overdrive. It's very aggressive, very fast, very loud, very angry sounding riffs. And let's focus on the bass line a little bit here because Steve Harris is one of the absolute bass legends. He's a very innovative and intelligent musician and arranger, and he went against the popular trend back then of playing these heavier styles of music with the pick on the bass, and chose instead to use the more traditional, more old school finger style sound. What this allowed him to do was to develop a very high level of dexterity in his right hand, which is very evident in this in the consistent nature of the 16th notes and how loud and aggressive they are, how present they are. They're so in your face. And a few things to watch out here are they need to be spaced very evenly. They need to be dynamically very consistent. They need to sound angry. It needs to match with that extremely fast guitar riff that happens. Uh, it's again slightly unconventional, locking in with the guitar instead of the drums, but it makes for such a beautiful intro and just sets such lovely precedent for the rest of the song to come. Finally, we're going to be looking at a jazz funk fusion piece called Birdland by Weather Report. Now, this song features some wonderful jazz harmonies and the very signature groove and the bass forward sound of R&B funk. An interesting section we have highlighted here is the use of pinch harmonics or artificial harmonics in the breakdown of the song. Playing artificial harmonics produces a very high-pitched sound, which is quite unexpected from a bass, but sounds very beautiful and musical and quite unusual uh, when uh, when used in the context like this. The goal, I think, for the writing was to have a section that stood out, sounded slightly different, slightly against the grain, and they managed it so well with this section here. The precision required to play these pinched harmonics is extremely high, and things are made even more challenging by the fact that the bends on the left hand that happen here are being done at the same time as the harmonics are being pinched. So I should tell you about the articulation aspect of this song once we listen to it. But let's take a listen to the breakdown and then beyond it a little bit. Right? Very cleverly written section, of course, and it makes you feel a very different way than what you would if you heard any other instrument do this. So the pinch harmonic section was right up front there in the forefront of the entire sound. It was backed by the piano, and towards the end, it was harmonized by the saxophone. Really unusual and very interesting sound to listen to, something I quite enjoyed myself. Uh, as far as articulation is concerned, it was an interesting change to go from those long, uh, you know, kind of atmospheric sounding pinched harmonics to the very straight ahead, typical funk bass lines. And there are some staccatos interspersed by very legato pushes, semiquaver pushes throughout the next section, which is kind of the refrain or the B section of the song. And something to notice here is that at the advanced level, it's not only our responsibility to know that a staccato is a short note, but it's also up to the player, the bassist, to measure out the length of the staccato, because there is always a sweet spot in every song which goes at certain tempos, which will maximize the impact of the drum and bass groove. And this example kind of perfectly showcases that the staccatos aren't so short that they're unnoticeable, but they aren't so long that they become legato notes. They still have enough definition and enough separation uh, to stand out as distinct notes, and it pushes the groove forward in a very, very beautiful way. So you need to play this song with a lot of confidence and a very strong command over your instrument. You should know your instrument very well, how the sounds are produced, in what way you should approach it to get it to sound the way you'd like. And that will give the rhythm section of the song the energy it demands. Right. With the techniques covered, we're going to move on to the theory aspect of things. Now, theory is quite the hated subject, especially amongst contemporary musicians, but it's a necessary evil. Let's just look at it as that for the sake of this workshop. Now, why theory is very important is that as a career musician, one is expected to know how to read sheet music. Because a lot of the times when you're working in studios, especially, you'll be required to play charts that you have never seen before on the spot, sight read, with barely a rehearsal at all. If you're lucky, you get, maybe one run through of it before you've got to record and deliver absolute perfection. So knowing these theoretical aspects, knowing how to read, knowing what the different movements are like, it helps us understand and value the music in a very different way, in a very intricate, close-up fashion. So firstly, let's talk about note reading. We're all bass players here. We're taking care of the low end. So we are going to be focusing on the bass clef. We are expected to know how to read staff notation and tablature. As far as note and rest values are concerned, we start off at the foundation level with semi-brief rests, minim rests. But as the grades advance, we move on all the way to demi-semiquaver rests. Pardon me. We are also required, in the advanced levels, to know dotted notes and rests. Next up, we have key signatures and time signatures. Again, you're going to see this as a repeated theme throughout this theory section, that we start off very easy, very familiar with our major and minor scales in the foundation levels. But through the intermediate levels, we start discovering a little bit more about modes of the major scale and the blues scale. And towards the end, towards the advanced grades, we are expected to know all of this. And a lot of the sections, a lot of the songs have bass solos as well. And the pentatonic scale for a lot of us, for most of us, for most styles of music, is the go-to scale for us to solo over. So it's very important to know the pentatonic scale. Time signatures, of course, we start out simple, then we move on to compound time signatures, and towards the advanced levels, we have irregular time signatures as well. A lot of the songs feature time signature changes. So we need to be very aware of what different time signatures sound like, feel like, how we can play in between the strong beats. All of that is very, very important to know. Next up, the final three things we're going to talk about are the rhythmic, the chordal, and the dynamic aspects of our playing. The bass player being the connection between the rhythmic and harmonic elements in a band, kind of has a the bass player is required to be very fluent in rhythmic styles, much like a drummer. So you need to know about ties, we need to know about syncopation, we need to know how to swing and play straight and how to pull those off very distinctly and very clearly. And of course, we have triplets and a lot of pushes as well. You could hear that a lot of styles, especially funk, have a lot of these semi-quaver pushes, which kind of make the groove feel like it's being driven forward by an external force. Chordally, again, we start off with majors and minors, but we are required to know diminished chords, dominant sevenths, sus2s, sus4s, and towards the end, dyads, triads, and power chords. They're very useful in terms of soloing as well. In fact, it's the greatest soloists and improvisers of all time have mastered the art of highlighting triads and chord tones while going between them with the outside notes. Dynamically, the foundation level starts off at mezzo piano and mezzo forte, but towards the end we're required to be able to play everything from a pianissimo to a fortissimo. And crescendos and diminuendos, of course, are both dynamic as well as interpretive, I feel, because the way to pull off a crescendo or a diminuendo can be very personal. It can be very personal to the bass player. It can be appropriate to a style. So it's a finesse thing as well. So we need to master that aspect as we move up the grades. Now I'd like to hand over to Anjali, ma'am.
Well, thank you very much, Ritvik, and to the whole team who have done a wonderful job at decoding the styles, techniques, and the theoretical aspect. So just to round off things, today we are sharing a lot of music over social media due to the circumstances. We are collaborating with artists far away. We are able to teach in places that we didn't think, which is physically not possible. And thus the expectation from musicians, whether they are performing or teachers, is much more. We can have a very brilliant set of songs we play and we perform, but there are two elements which we need to keep in mind here. which are very, very important for contemporary musicians. It's communication and performance. If you cannot connect with the audience, you are not successful in doing what you set out to do. And these two things are what Trinity emphasizes through their syllabus, building up real skills with real songs and giving you the chance to progress in a graded manner. So performance and communication are two elements which take you from a musician to an extraordinary musician. And our syllabus helps get you there. So thank you very much, everyone, for having attended this series. We'll be back very soon with more on the music front. Bye-bye and stay safe.